A challenging aspect of any group that you would be dealing with in a training session is how to develop the standard, because in my experience and in my role as a games development officer, I often get asked at workshops, etc., or even at training sessions, would this particular exercise be suitable for my group, with the under 8s, the under 10s, under 12s, whatever the varying age is of your group. Now, it can be tricky, especially if you have a high number of children, where if you have upwards of 20 in your group, there's always going to be a varying level of skill. Now, and this is the difference where you have to define where you find the physical age of a player, but then the skills age of a player, where a player could come up to the club to come training, where the only time they train, be it football or be it hurling, the only time they're actually exposed to training skills in hurling or football is actually in your session. Whereas you could have 5 or 6 or 7 players who would be classed as gifted, but they're just getting the extra practice at home, be it with their parents or their older brothers and sisters, and they will then start leaping ahead. It's the same scenario in a classroom. You can always tell the children who have done the extra work maybe outside of school or who are getting the extra help, they tend to stand out. So managing that can be difficult, but what you're trying to do in effect in your training session is to challenge the gifted players as well as challenging the weaker players. So what you're trying to do is raise the ceiling of your group while also raising the floor, so that the lower end by the end of the year isn't actually that low, while the higher end has gotten higher. Because there could be nothing worse, trying to manage the players, manage children especially, if the gifted players don't feel they're being challenged. Same as in a classroom, it can happen very easily. Any teacher would know where they'll get bored, they'll start acting up, disrupting the group maybe even, and then they will draw extra attention, but not in the right way, where you've almost turned to them to speak to them too often. So what you're trying to do is maybe incorporate something into the training session where you're challenging your gifted players, your stronger players, and don't limit the session. Don't try and tell them for example, under 8s, if you have 3 or 4 players who are extremely good at rising the ball and hitting the ball out of their hand in hurling, or they're very good at the solo bounce and kicking the ball over the bar on the run. Try and incorporate their strengths into the training session, because if you limit your sessions, what you're going to end up doing is limiting your players. So reward them by maybe giving them 5 minutes where it's full on open rules like a game, okay? So then you've effectively put it on them to challenge the other players within the group, challenge the children that are their own age, and it becomes a peer learning exercise where the gifted players are being challenged because you're putting a particular onus on them, but then also the weaker or mid-level players then have to come up to the same standard as their friends, their peers, and overall you'll create you'll develop standards fairly quickly, which is what we're trying to get to, and overall a more enjoyable training session, a more enjoyable training week for everybody, the weaker players, the mid-level players, and then also your gifted players. So just keep that in mind now while you're going ahead with your plans, seeing as we have so much extra time now with the time off. Just try and use it, discuss with your other coaches in your coaching group, and the children, any age, will appreciate it an awful lot more.